Rivals 2 just had its second Kickstarter backer beta back in May. I finally got the chance to play it, and it's the most fun I've had with a platform fighter in a long time. The engine is super crisp, movement feels fantastic, the art style looks great, and Melee and Project Plus players, you should feel like you're right at home. But there's been a lot of controversy over one mechanic: crouch canceling. After the May beta test, players were saying how strong crouch canceling feels and how frustrating it is to play against. There were more than a few people upset about it on Twitter. Look, I get it. I'm a Project Plus player, so I've been dealing with really strong crouch canceling for like over 10 years now. But even I came away from this beta feeling like it was just a little bit too strong. If you're new to my channel, my tag is Hyperflame. I've been playing Melee and Project M since 2013, and I was pretty good back in the day.
Pretty close though. Oh, he gets it again!
And I guess I'm still pretty decent.
Oh.
I was also on the dev team for Project Plus, so I've got a lot of experience with the games that are the closest to Rivals 2. Before I get started, huge disclaimer. Rivals 2 is still in beta. This means you should expect a lot of things to change between now and the full release. And, in fact, a lot of it already has, but I'll get to that later. For now, I want to talk about why crouch canceling felt so good in this patch. There's a lot of misconceptions about what crouch canceling actually is, so I want to clarify a few things. But first, we need to talk about parallel universes. Just kidding, but there is a lot to explain, so bear with me. First, let me talk about the major system mechanics in Rivals 2. Hitlag, also known as hit stop, and officially referred to as hit pause in Rivals 2, is the period of time after an attack connects where a character is frozen in time. This isn't a mechanic that's unique to Rivals 2. Hitlag exists in other platform fighters, fighting games, and even other genres. Hitlag has a huge effect on how attacks feel, and is a core part of the Rivals 2 engine. Directional influence, or DI, is a term for changing your launch trajectory during the hit lag for an attack. DI can help you survive longer and get out of combos faster, but it can also get you killed early. Single Shift Directional Influence, or SSDI, is the term for teleporting your character a short distance after hit lag. To SSDI, flick either the sticks during hit lag, or rotate your stick 45 degrees. When hit lag ends, you'll teleport a short distance. SSDI can help you escape combos, and it's especially good for teching against a wall. Smash players know this mechanic as Smash DI, SDI, or hit stun shuffling. Rivals 2 implements SSDI slightly differently from how SDI works in Smash. In the Super Smash Bros. Series, SDI can be done on every frame, which means you can wiggle your stick to get multiple SDI inputs. In Rivals 2, however, SSDI can only be done once during hit lag, which discourages mashing, and the teleport happens after hit lag ends. Rivals 1 didn't actually have SSDI, and it was only added to Rivals 2 in the May backer beta. However, both games have always had ASDI. Automatic Shift DI, or ASDI, is a weaker form of SSDI. While SSDI requires precise timing, you only need to hold the direction until hit lag ends to ASDI. It only goes half as far as SSDI, but it's still useful for escaping rapid multi-hit moves, such as Zedderburn's up special. When you SSDI, ASDI is also applied. They're actually added together. ASDI is the reason why crouch canceling works. During a hit lag, players can hold down to ASDI toward the floor. If the attack is weak enough, you'll snap to the floor and take half as much hit stun. This allows you to act much faster than you normally would, giving you a chance to counterattack. If you take enough knockback to go into Tumble, then you'll end up in the knockdown state on the floor, giving you a chance to tech, get up attack, or roll away. But wait, there was no crouching in any of those examples. Why is it called crouch canceling? Crouch canceling, or CC, sometimes called true CC, is actually its own separate mechanic. If you're hit during your crouching animation, you take less knockback. In Rivals 2, you take 20% less knockback. What most people usually mean when they say crouch cancel is actually just ASDI down. They aren't the same thing, but they work together to help you stick to the floor. Calling that technique crouch canceling is actually a little bit misleading, so we just call it floor hugging. Floor hugging stops working once you take enough vertical knockback so that ASDI down doesn't teleport you far enough to snap back to the ground. Crouch canceling allows you to reduce the knockback you take so that floor hugging works for even longer. Combined with DI, you can survive until absurdly high percents. Crouch canceling is actually far stronger in Melee MP+. In those games, you take 33% less knockback and hit lag. And when you floor hug, you only go through 4 frames of landing lag before you can act. Compare this to Rivals 2, where crouch canceling is only a 20% knockback reduction, and floor hugging only cuts hit stun in half. Floor hugging in Melee MP+ is super good, but doesn't feel as OP as it does in the Rivals 2 beta. What gives? Rivals 2 is a platform fighter with a lot of weak attacks. Many characters have aerials and tilts that don't send very far, even at high percents. While this is great for combos, it means that you're going to have a harder time breaking through floor hugging, and by extension, CC. Certain characters that rely on fast and weak moves to string together long combos, like Rano, have a much harder time breaking CC. For example, in this patch against Zetterburn, Rano's down tilt doesn't break through ASDI down until around 75%. As for CC, it doesn't break through that until over 130%. And even then, it doesn't actually force a pop-up until almost 170%. Raster has similar issues. All of his tilt aerials are designed to be weak combo tools and struggle to break through floor hugging. Even Loxodon, the elephant with a giant axe for a weapon, can struggle against floor hugging too. His up air and forward air have pretty weak hitboxes attached to them, and the first hit of his forward tilt is always floor huggable no matter the percent. In Rivals of Aether, having weak moves wasn't an issue because floor hugging didn't really exist the way it does in Rivals 2. Crouch canceling existed, but you could only floor hug against extremely weak moves like projectiles. Having weak moves with low base knockback and low knockback scaling made a lot of sense for that engine. But in the transition to Rivals 2, characters' movesets have stayed pretty much the same. The same combo tools are now countered by holding down. Look at Zetterburn's dash attack, for example. In Rivals of Aether, landing a dash attack would always pop your opponent up, giving you an opportunity to confirm it into up smash. But in Rivals 2, Zetter's dash attack is susceptible to being floor hugged for a long time. Reason number 2. The knockback threshold for Tumble is too high. When a character takes enough knockback, they get put into an animation called Tumble. In this animation, if you collide with the ground, you get put into a knockdown state. You can avoid this knockdown state by teching. In an effort to reduce the strength of tech chasing, the devs raised the Tumble threshold from 25 to 30 in the May beta. This meant you needed to take more knockback to get sent into Tumble. As small as that change sounds, it actually had a significant impact on floor hugging, resulting in more scenarios where you could floor hug an attack without being knocked down. The third reason is that crouch canceling is active on frame 1 of crouching. Although crouch canceling can't be done during any other animation, like attacks, peck rolls, or wave dashes, crouch canceling takes effect from the very first frame that you start crouching. Sometimes, you can crouch cancel in reaction, like during a jab combo. This can feel really bad for the offensive player. There isn't really any commitment to crouch canceling because it happens so fast, it's on frame 1. So a quick fix for this could be to increase the startup time by a few frames, just so it's not instant. The fourth reason is that ASDI might be too strong. As a reminder, floor hugging stops working once ASDI can't teleport you far enough to get back to the ground. If the distance ASDI teleports you gets reduced, then floor hugging will stop working earlier. However, traditionally ASDI has been exactly half as strong as SSDI, so if ASDI gets nerfed, then SSDI will as well. It'll be tricky to balance. All of these reasons make floor hugging very good in Rivals 2. But I've got one more reason that's really more of a theory, and that's the ground collision detection system. Take this one with a grain of salt because this is a little bit of a weird theory. I've noticed from my time playing that characters seem to collide with the ground from relatively high up. Let me show you what I mean by that. If I air dodge into the ground in Melee, you can see that my character model actually clips a little bit into the ground before landing. But in Rivals 2, there's a huge difference. If I air dodge into the ground, I snap to it from a much higher height. The same thing happens with Tumble. Look at the difference between how high a character touches the ground in Melee versus Rivals 2. This is probably what makes movement feel so smooth in Rivals 2. It's easier to snap to the floor, making things like wave landing much more lenient. My theory is that this also affects floor hugging. You might be able to ASDI or SSDI into the floor from pretty high up, and I think I've noticed a couple situations where this has happened already. Regardless, this brings me to my final and most important reason why floor hugging feels OP. Skill issue. That's right, you heard me. I think that we're all just really bad at playing around floor hugging. It's really easy to learn how to do, and pretty hard to learn how to play against. Especially for those of you coming from Rivals 1 where there were a lot less defensive options, it can be really unintuitive. I hit the opponent, but I got punished for it. Doesn't exactly seem fair on paper. But as an experienced top-level P+ player, I've actually come to appreciate crouch canceling and floor hugging as a balancing tool against mindless, spammy offense. Or maybe I just have Stockholm Syndrome. I just spent all this time explaining why floor hugging is OP, but now I'm here to tell you that floor hugging is a good thing. Rivals of Aether was a game designed to be very offense-heavy. The only defense you had against an opponent throwing attacks at you was to get out of the way, or to hard read with a parry. Getting out of the way was usually the better and safer option. While having quick, safe moves that are hard to punish sounds great for offensive players, it can actually lead to highly defensive gameplay at a top level. As a result, characters that were fast and had quick attacks were very strong. The devs actually introduced whiff lag to Rivals 1, additional lag when an attack missed. This gave slower characters a chance to deal with faster characters and frame data without ruining existing combo trees. Just read what Dan Farnese himself said. The issue we had with Rivals being tuned toward aggression is that fast buttons became king. Maple and other characters could just spam attacks in neutral and use their speed to weave out a punishment. It's why we ended up adding whiff lag. More lag when you miss an attack. Rivals 2 doesn't have any whiff lag, which I think is great for muscle memory. To deal with spammy gameplay though, Rivals 2 borrowed shields and floor hugging as mechanics from other platform fighters, and I think this can actually make Rivals 2 more aggressive. How does adding defense make the game more offensive, you ask? Well, you see, you can use shielding and crouching to force your opponent to make mistakes. By running up with a shield, you can trick your opponent into hitting your shield, or you can crouch at low percents and get a punish off of CC. But shields would be pretty broken if they didn't have a counter. Rivals 2 not only introduced shields, but also grabs, completing the rock paper scissors gameplay that's pretty common across fighting games. Attacks beat grabs, shields beat attacks, and grabs beat shields. It's a great dynamic that has made fighting games interesting for decades. Floor hugging is just a different kind of blocking. It still loses to grabs. Being in the lead at a low percent can be scary for the opponent and gives you the opportunity to rush at them. Or if you've just lost a stock and now you're behind, you've regained your ability to floor hug, and now it serves as a comeback mechanic. Although unintuitive, floor hugging isn't impossible to beat. Playing around it requires you to carefully think about when, where, and why you're throwing out attacks. As I just mentioned earlier, grabs beat floor hugging and CC. Tech chasing with grabs is a really strong option at low percents. Besides that, every character has their own tools to break through floor hugs, although those tools may not be obvious. All attacks that spike or send downward will beat floor hugging. When hit by a spike, instead of snapping to the floor, you'll go through a long hit stun animation called flinch. At high enough percents, you can still floor hug to prevent yourself from being popped up, but you won't get the chance to counterattack. This doesn't just apply to the obvious spikes like Maple's forward air or Loxodon's down air. Even Zetterburn's nair, which sends opponents the direction he's currently traveling, can break through floor hugs too. Just because a move is too weak to break through floor hugs, it doesn't mean it can't be used. Learning to space your moves so that you can't be punished, even on hit, is an important skill that you should be learning even if crouch canceling wasn't in the game. The same spacing that keeps you safe against shields also keeps you safe against floor hugs. If Clarion down tilts an opponent that's too close to her, she can get punished. But if she spaces it well, it's much harder or even impossible to punish her. Just like how you can bait an opponent into whiffing a shield grab, you can bait CC from an opponent and then punish them for it. Some characters have strong aerials that break through CC early, or attacks that simply ignore it altogether. Be smart about what moves you're throwing out. You can't just run at an opponent and expect to win with brute force in Rivals 2. But with well-planned gameplay, floor hugs are no problem. Despite all my criticisms, I think that floor hugging and crouch canceling actually add a good amount of depth to Rivals 2. I'm not in love with the mechanic, but it can make for some interesting gameplay dynamics and also lead to some pretty clutch moments. After years of using and playing against it in Melee and P+, I think that Rivals 2 is probably the better game with it than without it. It's just overtuned at the moment. The devs are already aware of how strong floor hugging was in this patch, and are already trying out changes to reduce how good it is. Some changes that they're trying include a lower tumble threshold, making crouch cancel only active during the full crouch and not during startup, weaker SSDI and ASDI, making multi-hit moves resistant to floor hugging, and disabling floor hugging if you were hit while airborne. I think all of these are great changes that are going to make floor hugging less obnoxious to play against, but still reward players for being intentional about using it. Personally, I would like to see some sort of visual indicator or maybe an audio cue, because that's part of the reason why floor hugging is so unintuitive to play against. It's really hard to see when it happens. I'm glad to see that the devs are taking steps to address this, but I'm also not surprised because, once again, Rivals 2 is still in beta. The devs are carefully listening to our feedback and adjusting gameplay in response, but they're not going to get it right every time. Part of the reason why floor hugging was so good in this patch is because they tried to make tech chasing less common, and this was one of the side effects. Game balance is pretty fickle, and that's why we're playtesting it. One more thing, I've actually seen a few comments completely writing off the game already just because it's not replicating Rivals of Aether 1-to-1. Despite its similarities to the first game, Rivals 2 is very different, and that's its intended design. It might not be the game that you hoped it would be, but don't attack the devs just because it's not Rivals of Aether again. Trust in Aether Studios to make a brand new game that feels a little bit different than what we're all used to, but enough negativity. Rivals 2 has left an incredible impression on me so far, and I'm super excited about the game. I think that Rivals 2 is going to be the best platform fighter, period, but it's only going to be that way with your feedback. If you have access to the beta already, then make sure to playtest and leave your feedback. And if you don't have access, well, you can still kickstart the game right now and get access to the next beta at the end of June, which is in a couple of weeks. I hope this was helpful, and if you liked what you saw, I'm planning on making a ton more content for Rivals 2, so don't forget to subscribe, and also follow me on Twitch, where I'll be streaming the game. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in Grand Finals.